Right, today on our agenda is 188 Cannon Street East and 134 through 136 Ferguson Avenue North. This design review panel meeting being held virtually is being recorded and will be posted on our City of Hamilton website for the design review panel. In attendance today are city staff, the applicant and the consultant team, members of the public and media. Please note there's no questions from the public at this meeting. A reminder to our panelists and consultants, please to keep your microphone muted when not speaking. Thank you for everyone attending. And David, you may begin when ready.
Session is being recorded.
Yes, I confirm.
Any changes to the agenda today?
No.
I'm assuming that there are no conflict of interest from any of the panelists, and I'll take silence to be that case. So on the agenda today is the review of 188 Cannon Street East and 134 to 136 Ferguson Avenue North. The lead planner in the file is Mark Kellier. He can respond to any planning questions. Emily Bent, the heritage planner, is also available for questions on cultural heritage. Edward, we're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. And you can still see my screen share?
Yep.
So our proposed development here today is including a 32-story mixed-use building with a 5-story podium and includes 2 existing heritage buildings, of which the front portion is going to be retained or proposed to be retained and incorporated into the proposal. There are proposed 384 dwelling units with 188 meters square of commercial space at grade. And this is complemented by 134 parking spaces. On this air photo, the major diagonal street is Cannon Street running east-west, and our north-south is, of course, Ferguson. This area is on the eastern side of the downtown area and is, as you can see, surrounded by a mixture of residential and some commercial industrial uses. Okay, this is the project site looking off of Cannon Street, looking south. You can see the taller buildings of the downtown area in the sort of distance on the right and center. Okay. Looking a little further back, this is looking south along Ferguson Avenue, the corner of Cannon and Ferguson. Ferguson has a special paving and is denoted as a pedestrian space. And this is looking east, back down Cannon Street. Cannon Street is, of course, one way traffic direction and does have this bi-directional bike lane on the south side, which the building is proposed on. And you can see, I believe, a 12-story building about 1 block away on Cannon Street that's within the last 5 years. Okay, and then two photographs here. The top photograph is looking north along Ferguson Avenue, half block south of the proposed building. So where the cursor is now, kind of above the pedestrian with the red jacket was the proposed site. And then the one on the bottom is further down a block away along Ferguson, where we see the mix of, in this case, smaller residential and a school on the left. We have our conceptual site plan, Cannon Street again, and then Ferguson, some pedestrian improvements noted along Ferguson. And at the bottom corner here are the portion of those 2 existing dwellings and the larger complex facing Cannon Street. And then the different loading parking garbage shown off of the lane access. Okay. During the formal consultation, staff had some questions and want the applicant to demonstrate the proposed building height did not exceed the height of the Niagara Escarpment. In addition, the applicant would be required to satisfy the requirements of the holding provisions, including servicing traffic, wind, sun shadow, and visual impacts. Staff were recommending that the applicant front the vehicular parking located above the ground level with permitted uses. And our questions that were posed to the panel was, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character, and taking into consideration the planned and proposed development in the surrounding area? Is the reuse of the existing dwelling successful in terms of the composition of massing and in the pedestrian functionality at grade? And how well does the proposal provide a mix of unit sizes to accommodate a range of household sizes and income levels? That concludes the staff portion, and I'll stop sharing. Hand it back over to you, David.
Thanks, Edward. We're now ready for the applicant to provide additional information.
Okay, thank you very
Say
much.
I should have added that please keep your presentation to under 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll do my best. Hi, everyone. I'm Mansour Kazrouni, architect and principal at Arcadis. My colleague Eduardo should be on the call, but he's been texting me saying he's having some trouble getting in. Our clients, Shamil Javani and Alan Leela, are on the call as well, as are Ryan from AJ Clark and Casper from ERA. So I'll be doing the presentation, but others might jump in during the Q&A. So I will share my screen. If you could kindly confirm that you can see it.
Yep.
Okay, I have a number of slides that deal with the site and context, but I'm going to breeze through them just because you've already just had a presentation on the site and context. It's located in the area marked in red at Ferguson and Cannon. As you also heard, there are two heritage residential home properties on the site. This illustration here just demonstrates the sort of volume of development underway in the relatively immediate area centered on the site, 500-meter radius and 750-meter radius, and just some of the projects and some associated visuals of those projects in terms of form and scale, and just to remind us of, you know, the activity underway in the context as it's emerging in the area. Zooming in a little closer, you have Beasley Park on the west side here, which I understand is being expanded all the way up to Ferguson. So for us, that's quite a key vantage point. There's a hydro corridor along Cannon and Ferguson, as you know, and as you just heard, has this wonderful sort of pedestrian quality based on the cobbly paving that exists on the street there. And then the two heritage homes at the southwest corner of the site. There's also, I should just say, a lane here on the east side of the site, which is, you know, an important kind of organizational element for us. You've already seen some of the pictures of the site, so I'm going to just slide past these. Just various vantage points, looking north, looking east, corner of Kelly and Ferguson, looking north on Cathart. That's the 12-story building that was just referenced. And in terms of zoning, the site is generally zoned as a high-rise 2. It's the sort of blue-purple designation here, which says high-rise 2, and then partially mid-rise on the southern kind of part of the site. Moving on to cultural heritage. And you just heard the summary. The heritage approach is in situ retention of the built form of the house substantially, except for the sort of rear portions, which are being demolished to make way for some development around it. But substantially, the house is being kind of retained in its entirety. The pieces that are being removed are extensions that were mostly built over time. So initially, that was our approach. First kind of blush stroke when we looked at the site, but then obviously got into understanding the context and the heritage significance of the homes, and quickly sort of re-envisioned it to carve the corner out around the site, and proposed this revised build form that really contemplates a 5-story podium street wall element, which steps up to 12 stories, that being in the mid-rise zone that I referenced earlier, and then 32-story tower in the high-rise portions of the site. We have created setbacks from the property for the tower of 3 meters on the north and west respectively, and 13.5 to the center line of the lane, to the end edge of the lane on the east side, and then 12.5 to the south side. So step backs and setbacks being obviously utilized as part of the organizing of the site. And diagrammatically, this just gives you a piece of the narrative with the heritage elements on the southwest corner. That's Ferguson, that's Cannon there that we are retaining. The park gets expanded out to Ferguson. So Ferguson gets this really nice pedestrian quality. I referenced the lane on the east. That's where our vehicular and service access occurs. As I explained earlier, we kind of carved the build form around the heritage homes and extruded them 5 stories, did a setback up to level 12, where we developed the mid-rise portion, and then the tower rises above that. So that's generally how the massing evolved. In terms of the expression, a key element borrowing from the heritage homes and their bay windows, which is also a predominant characteristic of many of the homes in the area. It's something that we decided to pick up on and start to reference in the podium/street wall expression, which will start to become apparent right here in this view. And this view is of the heritage homes there along Ferguson. And you can see how those bay window elements start to get interpreted as these masonry elements up above. And it's just a subtle reference, but it provides context, it provides scale. And we thought it's an interesting approach. We have set in the ground floor. You can see that we're taking that datum line across from the homes, kept the backdrop to the heritage home fairly neutral with an all glass facade with a more sort of articulated podium street wall element with residential balconies that overlook the park, which I think will be quite lovely. Tower sets back up above it. A strong contrast between podium street wall and tower, so that we really emphasize the lower scales of the building. In terms of materiality, the masonry picks up on the warmth and texture of the heritage homes again. So a real effort to make strong contextual references. This is a view at the corner, which is occupied by the lobby that gets notched in at the corner, respecting the daylight triangle. And then as we turn onto Cannon Street, the expression sort of continues. The residential wraps around. We've sort of camouflaged some above grade parking behind there. Still in development, the effort for the glazing here will be to introduce translucency, whether it's a frit pattern or some kind of texture on the glass that ensures that there's no visibility of cars. Of course, what's missing in this context is this enormous hydro sort of corridor pole that frankly precludes putting residential windows along that face. And then you see the view in its entirety with the tower above, which we've tried to keep very light and simple, not trying too hard. There's a very thin sort of grid element that faces the balconies. That same grid element manifests itself on the side walls of the building. There's white metal panel interspersed in the recessed kind of primary facade of the building so that we can limit the proportion of glass from a solid to glass ratio perspective. You also see the 12-story element there that's treated distinctly from the 5-story podium street wall, and then the stepping above that to create the tower.
So Mansoor, you're at your 10 minutes, just as a heads up.
Okay, give me 2 more and I'll breeze through the plans. So Heritage Homes there, we plan to introduce retail, lobby on Ferguson Street with the entrance facing Cannon, and then amenity facing Cannon Street. The sidewalks are very generous, 6.8 to 7.3-ish meters. The laneway has been widened to facilitate loading, vehicle servicing, parking, all of that. And tree planting, benches, street furniture, all of these elements that you see in the images to the right. I will go past some of these in the interest of time. And just an overview of the stats: 32 floors, 373 units, diverse mix, 136 stalls, parking spaces, and 192 bike parking spaces, amenity, 3,700 square meters. I think you've got a good grip on the massing by now. And just the above grade, we've sort of ensured that the parking is, for the most part, in behind active uses, particularly at grade. At the mezzanine level, there's very limited parking. There's bike parking facing Cannon Street, but again, the parking is buried within the block. It is at the upper levels that you see it, but as I explained, the hydro corridor becomes a limiter. Where we are facing Ferguson, we have residential units overlooking Ferguson and that idea of replicating the bay windows. I can keep it at that, just to point out the amenity level at level 6, where the building sets back. That's the 12-story extension element. And then the typical tower that takes off from level 13, and we introduce a green roof over that 12-story element. So why don't I stop there and I can clarify the rest of it through Q&A.
Thank you, Mansoor. So I'm going to turn to the panel members to ask for clarification questions, and the first go to Dana.
Hi. So the one question I have, I guess, is to the applicant and staff. The applicant noted in the presentation that a hydro pole, or was it a corridor, that precluded the ability to put upper level residential. And staff had noted that they had a recommendation to have permitted uses in the upper floors screening the parking. Could we get some clarification on whether that's precluding the ability to do that, or if the city staff are referring to other permitted uses such as commercial?
I presume you're, that's it. That question's for the city.
Hi, it's Mark Kaler here from Site Planning. I can't speak to the hydro line. I don't believe that was discussed at the formal consultation meeting, but in terms of the comment, it was out of the policy review that was done there, it was identified that above grade parking should, be wrapped with permitted uses where applicable. I'd like to I'll allow the applicant to kind of respond as to weather or what the technical issues are with that. But yeah, from staff's perspective, that's really coming from a policy and design lens, and our approach to above grade parking structures in the downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, I think these images are quite self-evident. This runs, you can see the width of the sidewalk there. And so, 4 or 5 meters away from the building facade, you've got a pretty significant hydro line that is very tall. And honestly, I think it makes a very inhospitable living environment on that face at that level to have these hydro lines directly outside your window, or to open a window that is, almost within arm's reach of a hydro corridor like that. So we've kind of chosen to stay away from it. We don't think it's appropriate, even from just the quality of living space perspective, notwithstanding rules. I think facing Ferguson, we have made the effort to create those permitted uses to camouflage the parking. And that this is really, and as we have at the ground level, we've completely concealed it at the ground level. So where we are able to, we're doing it. And I think in instances like this, we're taking the approach of saying that, we, through careful use of materials and articulation of the built form, we will ensure that there isn't visibility of cars through
Dan,
these.
do you have any other questions?
No further questions. Thank you.
Joey.
Thanks, David. I had a question about the heritage buildings, understanding that there are 2 that fall within the property line, and they're part of a sort of series of row houses. Is there any plans for 132 Ferguson as part of this development, or is there going to be potential collaboration with the adjacent owner of the property to kind of ensure a full and consistent and complete restoration of these buildings?
I believe as of now, our plans are limited to the property that belongs to our client. I don't know that we have the ability. I mean, would welcome any conversation, but we don't have the ability to influence a site that our client doesn't own.
Yeah.
But hopefully it prompts them to think about restoring their own property and kind of, frankly, improving the value of it in doing so.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, David, I'm not sure who's next.
Sorry, I thought I was talking, but I was muted. It's Jennifer Sison.
Perfect, thank you. So thank you, Edward and Mansoor, for your presentations. I had some questions about some of the ground level uses, or the interior to the building there. You've got one area on Ferguson labeled as incoming services and one labeled as vault. I was just wondering if you, on Cannon Street, I was wondering if you could speak to what those uses are.
So the vault is the transformer, and as you can appreciate, the proximity to the hydro, we were required to have it sort of in close proximity there, and that's where it resides. I'm just trying to get to the ground floor, so bear with me for a second. So that is the vault. Hopefully you can see my cursor.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, on Cannon Street, I don't see
Not
where.
on Cannon, on Ferguson, the incoming services, just above the townhomes, the retail. It's grayed out.
Oh, yeah, here, incoming services. So that, that would be, and admittedly, further development probably will occur, but that's where all the storm and drain and mechanical lines and things like that, whatever connects into the city infrastructure would come in. whether it needs that level of space. I gather that's your question and concern, is something we definitely look at.
Thank you. That's it for my questions.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David, and thank you for your presentations. I have a question about the parking garage and the way the envelope of the parking garage is treated on the upper floors. Is it a heated garage, and does it need to be completely, therefore, a robust envelope, or is there an opportunity to make screening that open air screening? What's the intent there?
Yeah. Typically, these garages tend to require sort of natural ventilation. So I don't think it'll be a completely sealed envelope in that regard. And there will be some opportunity for screens or natural ventilation. We've kind of been talking about, do we limit that to the east and west, or, least impact, right? So still reviewing that.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Mansoor, can you communicate any green initiatives that you're pursuing in this project?
Yeah, there's actually a slide which I frankly didn't get to. So thank you for that question. I hope the slide's here. Note to self, you can't get through so many slides in 10 minutes.
Should be the very last.
Very last. Oh, good to hear you're on, Eduardo.
Took a while.
Okay, so here we go. So look, these are the initiatives that we have identified and obviously will be focused on developing as we advance this project. The first one is going to be to look at ways to minimize the embodied carbon in the building, and in terms of rationalizing concrete structure and trying to come up with the most efficient use. Electric vehicle infrastructure, cycling infrastructure, bird collision deterrence, green roofs, renewable energy, water conservation, and of course, inside the building, high efficiency appliances, smart building technology that allows us to optimize the performance of the systems within the building. And then, building pedestrian-friendly amenities within the building. And then engagement and support on sustainability so that we can reinforce the green elements of the building as we kind of build the community within this development. And then really borrowing a page from the city of Toronto, just meeting or at the minimum meeting the requirements of green building, which is what that long-term flexibility refers to, in terms of ground floor height, structural live load capacity, the ability to adapt units, and things like that, and then waste management in terms of the streams. So, needless to say, the facade design, I already alluded to it in terms of, the limiting the proportion of glazing, so obviously reducing the load on the systems. Generally, what I'm finding is that the standards we're aspiring to across the GTA right now are resulting in, a fairly good level of sustainability. And you can see that there are a couple of initiatives here that go beyond that. So that's where we are right now in terms of what we contemplate as sustainability measures.
Are you muted there, David, again?
I am. A lot of really good things I said, but anyway. The question is just about the parking on the project. You're mention that there is a zoning bylaw that might allow 0 parking spaces within downtown Hamilton, and I'm just wondering if that goes through, does that change your parking proposal in any way?
We haven't really talked about that. I suspect that unless there is much stronger connectivity, there would be some basic parking requirement just within Hamilton in general to be able to market these units. So I think it's a bit of a balance between what's permitted and what the market demand is. I'm quite sure that no developer, including this one, is interested in building more parking than is required, not just by regulation, but also by market conditions. So I think they will be monitoring that in this project and looking for opportunities to reduce where they can.
Thanks. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists to provide their feedback and recommendations. So go to Dana first.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to start by saying thank you for coming. Excellent presentation that you put together and package. And I do want to commend you for all the work that you've done on this development, particularly around the design, but also the building placement and the urban design. I think that you've thought through the placement and orientation of the building and where the towers should be on site, along with step backs and the differentiation of the building podium and the tower design. I think really puts together a great piece. I do think the simplicity in the tower design and the podium is really nice from a non-architect perspective. I do think you will benefit greatly for the ground floor use as well as for the upper story podium uses if you go down 1 or 2 levels in underground parking. I think what we have in the ground floor with the incoming services, the vault, as well as the amenity space that has a really narrow pocket along Cannon Street is that currently with providing only the parking and the podium at grade, we end up with not enough activation. So there's not enough retail and amenity that really activates the street, particularly adjacent to the heritage buildings. And I think if you can go 1 or 2 levels below grade, you'll have more room for activation of the podium, both at grade and above grade. I understand the concerns around the hydro in the upper level where you have parking as well as bicycle parking. However, I think along the podium, along the street edges, it needs to be activated with residential uses. So I don't know if there's the ability to push the podium or the podium back a little bit in that area or working through the hydro constraints, but I think that's a very important thing moving forward. You mentioned that you would have glass that you wouldn't be able to see through, and so the parking wouldn't be visible. However, you're also talking about bird-friendly elements, so having reflective glass in that location is kind of 2 competing objectives. So if you were to do that, you'd have to make sure that you're also ensuring that the podium has bird-friendly glass, but also creates kind of an animated streetscape. So just think about that piece moving forward. There's some wind mitigation objectives in your wind study. Just around the corner in the amenity area. I just recommend putting those in place to ensure that you have comfortable wind conditions at the corner, but also in the amenity area. And lastly, you have a laneway here, which I think provides a lot of opportunity for something really unique to this project, whether it's lighting or some local art that could really kind of enhance the experience at grade along the laneway as people are kind of moving through the space. I think that would really kind of take this project to the next level and give it some uniqueness that's really kind of makes it like a really great addition to Hamilton's downtown. That's everything for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joey.
Thanks, David. And thank you for your presentation. I'd like to start by saying that I'm glad the heritage buildings are remaining fully intact and that they will be adaptively reused. And I understand that this is a process that involved planning and heritage staff, and also the heritage consultant and our architect and their larger team. So I think the value in that relationship is important, and that collaboration is important. And I'm glad to see that an initial design that did not consider the heritage building led to a design that I think is more complete and more richer as a result of the heritage building remaining intact. Overall, I think the massing does work fairly well. I feel that maybe the planes around the heritage buildings are a little bit snug. My colleagues will have ideas about this as well, and I'll leave that up to them. Outside from the formal references, I believe that the heritage buildings are a real resource to initiate a consideration on the influence of the public realm, particularly along Ferguson Avenue. There's already been some attention given to this road by the city by paying a little bit more attention to the materials along the road. Also, aligned with that, we have to understand the value of the fine grain which the heritage buildings provide. This is, and that fine grain I'm not seeing is sort of translated to the main project yet. Obviously, this is very difficult to do, also a result of accommodating hundreds of vertical residents. But I think with the programming of the heritage building, I think, and having them as retail, they're not yet supported. And for retail to be successful, you need quite a bit of support on both sides of the street typically. And I don't think that's there quite yet, but I think that the new project can support it by potentially having more retail along Ferguson Avenue at a finer grain. And so I recommend finding ways to pull more of that program along there within the ground floor or when designing the interiors of the heritage building. Also think about their flexibility. So if retail doesn't work, then the interiors of the heritage buildings can be used for office, cultural, and potentially even residential. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Sisson.
Thank you. So I'd have to start with, I definitely agree with the comments already made by Dana and Joey. Dana, I think you really captured some of the thoughts I had on street activation, so I'll probably skip those. And Joey, you've touched nicely on the fine grain scale that really does work, especially for a pedestrian street like Ferguson. And I did want to go into that a little bit further. So I agree with what Joey has said. I think by adding some more potential at-grade pedestrian entrances, looking at potential for retail, particularly in maybe those spaces that you noted about incoming services or even the vault, shifting those around so that you've got more of that active use at grade would definitely benefit this development and the area. And I hope that you could, again, kind of carry that same rhythm that the existing townhomes have throughout, because that's really what we see working in kind of a downtown and walkable public realm. I do really appreciate that you've stated pedestrians are the priority in the urban design brief, and I'm also very happy to see the reuse of the heritage buildings. I think this creates really great small retail opportunities, and those, as we know, encourage some smaller and even locally owned businesses, so it's always great to see that. I think you might need to consider adjustments at the street to make those retail buildings more accessible, because they do have the steps up to the building. There might need to be some consideration for that, or it might be an opportunity that the development further up the street, as you reuse that incoming servicing area, becomes your more accessible entry point. Another thought I would like you to consider would be keeping the street wall in line with those heritage building fronts to really give more space back to the public realm along Ferguson and that pedestrian street, as well as to help the proposed building not overshadow the heritage, which is, I think Joey and Dana have kind of alluded to, are really like, it's such a key and interesting part of the development. It would be a shame to kind of overshadow that with the new proposed development. I think the landscape plan was really well detailed and thought out. It's great to see that level of detail. I was happy to see that you've had some consideration for soil cells in there because it is such an urban condition, but do have some concerns with the potential conflict that these could have with the hydro lines. So I think maybe a little bit of thought into what species would be going in there, particularly as that would be done by the city. I was also happy to see the level of detail for the 6th floor outdoor amenity space, definitely needed on a constrained site like this. And I was happy to see that you've kind of tucked away your vehicular access in the back, though I do have concerns with, always thinking about security and SEPTED concerns. You might need to be thinking a little bit about how this area is accessed and how it's lit to make sure that it stays safe for residents or any members of the public. I am also happy that you provided the full wind study and your summary memo. Similar to Dana, I had some concerns with the wind impacts. More so, the northwest corner has gotten less ideal, and they do have some recommendations that I think could be implemented to help with that, as well as there's also some impacts happening across the street. Considering that this area is intended to develop with additional high-rise buildings, I'd encourage you to strongly take another look at that and make sure that we put in whatever mitigation we can to try to reduce those impacts, especially as they may be cumulative over time. Overall, I'm really happy to see the level of detail that you put together here. I commend you on a great package, and I'm looking forward to see this evolve. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David, and thank you for your presentation. It a very comprehensive presentation, which is a joy to see. Also, congratulations on making a great design. I think there's an elegance to what we see here on the screen, taking that bay window notion from the heritage buildings and making it into a stronger, larger scale, more modern expression on the podium is great. I think it's really strong, and carrying the materiality through in those new brick bay piers is a great gesture. My question about the permeability of the parking levels relates to how the wall that we see here of spandrel panel that looks into some parking. I'm wondering if that could be a more subdued, darker color screen expression, similar to the bays that are in brick, and seem less curtain wall. The curtain wall seems to, I know it's a contrast to the heritage building, so I appreciate that difference, but I think the curtain wall makes it look a little too officey, and I think that there's a lovely texture and appreciation for the podium that's here that maybe could carry through to the screening of the parking garage. The podium and the tower are, as you said, deliberately very, very different. I think there's a great resolution to the podium design and not as much resolution to the tower. So I'd like to see a bit more materiality and texture up there. I think in your material palette, it's deemed to be all metal panel. White metal panel tends to look dirty over time. So a bit more richness there would be, richness even in color or texture would be appreciated. The bit that you have that is the mid-rise portion that provides the block that comes out at the roughly the 12-story mark that we can see here now on the screen. I think that the whole overall scheme would be much stronger if it was just the podium and the tower. And so massing wise, it would be far clearer if it was just those volumes. And we noted that your floor plate on the tower is large. It's 841 meters squared you know, whereas the tall building guidelines suggest 750 is a better number. So you're going quite a bit over what we generally see. And I'm wondering if there's a trade-off here, like reduce the massing on the mid-rise portion in order to go a little bit larger on the tower. I just think for to make it a little less bulky, the overall scheme would be a lot more elegant and meet the, you know, the elegance that you've got already going in the podium portion that we see here. And those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess conclusion, most of what I was going to be saying has been said by others. I think the project is very well developed and it's presented it to a point where the kind of observations we make are really ones about refinement and nuance. There are, and which is commendable, of course. And in that spirit, I won't repeat what everybody said about the strong points. I'm going to focus on a few nuances that I agree could make it a little better. And one is picking up on what Jennifer just said about the size of the block. I think it's maybe a bit large, and maybe my strategy would be a bit different than Jennifer's. I might take that look to make the footprint of the towers you know, the targeted 750 footprint if possible, and that might address some of the challenges that I mean, I think that at the ground floor, certainly it's great that the heritage houses are kept, and that's a huge improvement from the scheme in the earlier stages when it wasn't there. I'm just thinking that there, you know, a little bit of tweaking there in that relationship. It's not quite a home run for me yet. Part of it may be addressed by that, you know, solving that incoming service room and turning it into something that's more, you know, more street oriented. It seems like a pretty, you know, a little bit of a brutal part of the facade right beside these, and an area where you might want to have some more public oriented street or active rather than a vent and a sort of a blank wall. And I agree with Jennifer, the first Jennifer's comments about maybe looking at setting that ground zone in a bit further all the way along there to make that connection to the heritage and the widening of the street facing onto Ferguson, which has that lovely pedestrian realm. And you know, it is the ground floor that I see, you know, in the interest of economy and avoiding a below grade, it's fairly dense with support space. And if there was a way to, you know, capture that, you know, I know there's some stacking of ramps and things that make it's a pretty tight site to make that a challenge. But I think the benefit of, you know, not having any parking and just maybe a ramp up and a ramp down would allow you to move maybe some of those services, things like the garbage refuge storage to the other side, and make the amenity area along Cannon a little more convincingly scaled, and also push some of the, you know, the service, maybe the electrical and the incoming down into the basement. It would just create a little bit more real estate on the ground floor that would support the kind of street activities that I think that you know, a project of this scale should really be able to support and, you know, give back to the city. I am also sympathetic to the second Jennifer's comments about the relative character of the lower podium as being very sophisticated and successful, and you know, I quite like the direction that it's going there, and the upper one as being, you know, legitimately different, but maybe a bit too different, and maybe there could be some more formal or massing characteristics that unite the two elements. But I mean, that's getting into more of a aesthetic thing. So just checking to see if there's any other things that I would build? Well, one of the comments about, why you do not have screening on the second floor or the residential floors, or sorry, the parking floors on the upper level. I mean, you commented if you can pull one of those, that floor plane up, the upper one, your argument about not having units facing onto the hydro. I mean, I am sympathetic and I agree that maybe that isn't the best one, but your plan does show at least one residential unit that is completely facing that within the zone that you have. So if you're, it kind of belies your position there. The one at the north there is completely facing the street that you're suggesting isn't so amenable. So, I mean, you may want to think about their arrangement of your units and try and avoid that one having.
Orient them westwards. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. The other last comment was the bicycles are located on the upper level, a mezzanine or something. It seems fairly labyrinthine to try and get there, and maybe even dangerous in that you would be sharing the ramp route to get. And this is another thing that maybe if you could make, I mean, you have to go down one story probably at least for the parking for your foundations anyway. So we know that parking is expensive in the ground and probably the soils are terrible there and all that. But if you could maybe push, you might be able to find some real estate where the biking might be at grade and not sort of, a little hard to, either you're either going up a staircase or you're riding up a ramp, and that's obviously not ideal. So otherwise, I think it's it's a very solid scheme, and again, I think we really appreciate the level of the quality of the presentation, and it made it easy to understand and see where we could see both the potential that you have and the some of the other areas that we've talked about where you could maybe take another look. I don't know if you have any questions for us, but otherwise I think we've got 4 minutes.
I think we're good. I appreciate the feedback and certainly food for thought for us to take back and consider.
Well, and I appreciate your thinking on the green. I encourage other developers to take the same strategy that you guys are pursuing there.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That will conclude the first meeting. We'll see the panel back at 2:15 for our second. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.